Joining us exclusively at the moment is Sajeeb Wazed, who's the son of former Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina. Sajeeb Wazed joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much, sir, for taking the time out and speaking to us here at Times Now. And let me begin by asking you, one of your first reactions that we saw coming in yesterday, when we saw those events unfold, the tragic violence that was taking place, is that your very real fear that Bangladesh would be turned into Pakistan. That was your first reaction. Can you tell us what was going through your mind and why you said so?
Well, look, for the last 15 years, the Awami League has kept Bangladesh stable. It has kept Bangladesh developing. It has transformed Bangladesh. If you look at what's happening today, there is no law and order. So we have had our members of parliament killed. We have had the homes of each and every minister of our government has been burned down to the ground. We have had Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujib's home, where my entire family was murdered in the coup of 1975, and which was a museum, that has been burned down to the ground. His Bangabandhu's monuments are being destroyed, and mobs are ransacking everywhere. The police have, because these mobs, these protesters attacked the police and killed so many police officers, the police have quit. There is no law and order in the country. And now, from what I'm hearing, non-political houses are being looted as well. Temples, Hindu temple minorities are being attacked. Hindu temples are being attacked. And unfortunately, you do not have a government in Bangladesh. There is no government right now. They're trying to form one with our intellectuals, but these intellectuals do not have a political support base. And without that, who's going to follow their orders? It remains to be seen if they can even control, if they can even bring law and order back, let alone stability.
Right. And let me bring you back to, Sheikh Hasina herself. Have you spoken to her? She's in the national capital, New Delhi, at the moment, we understand. And what really have you discussed? Because there was talk of her heading to the United States, United Kingdom. There was even talk of Helsinki as a potential destination. What really are you hearing in terms of what really are her plans and where she hopes she would be able to live safely?
No, those are just rumors. She hasn't made no decision on that yet. She's going to stay in Delhi for a little while. My sister is there as well, so she's not alone. And she has not decided where she's going to live.
Right. But what can you tell us about her escape? And in fact, if you would have spoken to her, what were those circumstances around, and how tense were you at the moment that she was leaving Bangladesh?
Well, I was very tense, not because she was leaving Bangladesh, but because she didn't want to leave Bangladesh. And we in the family had to convince her. She said, "This is my country, I don't want to leave." And I said, the problem is this is not a political movement anymore. This is a mob, and they're going to kill you. And that is one thing we cannot have.
Right. And was there a 45-minute deadline by the military? What exactly was stated to her? Because the military provided her a transport aircraft, but we also heard them say that they're going to take over in the interim. Was there a deadline that was sent by the military or any other political force, maybe the student protesters? Can you take us through that?
No, there was no deadline, but there was a time estimate that within a certain amount of time, the protesters would reach the Prime Minister's residence. And so there was no deadline set, but there was an estimate that if we don't move within this time frame, then we won't be able to move because of the mob, not because there was a deadline.
Right. And have you heard about your other Awami League leaders and MPs? Some of them we've heard have been attacked, also in terms of facilitating their safety in any way, or evacuating them from Bangladesh. Any updates on that? Because there were reports of at least one minister who's been detained while trying to leave from the airport there in Dhaka.
Yes, that is our Minister for Information Technology, young Minister Palok. He has been detained. And he has done nothing wrong. He has really been the key person in helping me digitize Bangladesh. He's an honest guy. He has never been involved in corruption. But this government has decided to detain him for no reason. But all of our MPs, some of our MPs have been killed. Almost, I think, each and every one of our ministers' houses and homes have been ransacked and burned to the ground. You've had our member of parliament, our cricketer Mashrafi, his home has been burned, set on fire and looted. So right now there is absolutely no security, no law and order in Bangladesh. So we are trying to save our people. We are trying to get them out, but this government now is, they don't have any power anywhere, but at the airport, they're stopping our people and arresting. Then there is no need for that.
Right. Also, we've seen throughout Bangladesh different instances of statues of your grandfather, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, that have been, either destroyed, decapitated, or disrespected, if I can put it mildly, in multiple ways. Of course, the Prime Minister's house has been broken to, their personal belongings that have been put on display by vandalizers, all of that's out there on social media. One certainly can't justify the violence in any which way. But this kind of reaction by such a huge number of people who are seen at least on the streets, is it because of quota reservations, but due to larger underlying anger with the government?
I think what you're seeing is the vocal minority, because look, in any country, even in a democratic country, no government is going to win 100% of the vote and 100% of support. And so you're seeing this minority, but now you're seeing their character. I mean, they call themselves students. They're backed by our intellectuals who are supposed to be the elite of our society. But look at their character. They're not protesters. They're just a mob. So I think mob mentality took over. I don't think any political calculation had anything to do with it. It just became a mob that was just hell-bent on creating violence, and they're continuing to create violence.
Right, because in the run-up to all of these protests that have been taking place, there have been allegations that there was an undemocratic way in which the Sheikh Hasina government that was elected unopposed, and that she had developed a certain autocratic tendencies. How do you respond to this criticism that has been coming in?
Look, that is one accusation that starts being made against any leader, especially in a developing country that has been there for a little while and is actually doing good for the country. You see, especially the elite who can never win the votes in an election, and the opposition who, in our case, they boycott, but more importantly, if you look at what our opposition did in the previous elections, during that time, they were conducting arson attacks, firebombing transportation, killing, burning innocent civilians to death. Women and children were burned to death. And so during this election, they keep talking about mass arrests. Well, yes, our government arrested everyone who was suspected of being involved in the arson attacks so that we could conduct a safe election without arson attacks. That was what we were afraid of. And for that, if you want to call us autocratic, well, then so what? Then so be it. We cannot control militants without violence. So then we have to let the militants have a free hand. Then we have to let whoever wants to burn people have a free hand. You cannot have both. You cannot make an egg without cracking its shell.
Right.
So unfortunately, that is what my mother is blamed for. Were things perfect? Were mistakes made by our government people in the past? Yes, of course. But I myself was one of those that was very vocal in calling out the mistakes, that we shouldn't have done this, we shouldn't have done that. Right. But we were a democratic government, and we always wanted to do the right thing. We did the right thing. We transformed Bangladesh, and we kept Bangladeshi citizens safe. And you cannot keep citizens safe without using force against militants and those who would create violence, which is what is happening now.
No, undoubtedly, from India's perspective, Joy, certainly the crackdown on Indian insurgent groups in the northeast also that has happened from Bangladeshi soil, as well as the crackdown on radical elements within Bangladesh. Both of these are things that India has very certainly seen. But when you have people like Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus, against whom, of course, there are a dozen or several dozen graft cases, when someone like him, comes out and says that the charges slapped against me of labor law violations, corruption, money laundering, etc., he says these are all politically motivated. So that is where the questions then arise of what has actually happened in Bangladesh. How would you view that?
So if you look at the Grameen Commission report that was made by an independent commission many years ago when graft was first discovered at Grameen Bank, I would refer you to that. The labor law charges were not brought by our government. They were brought by the laborers. This is a civil suit. The government has nothing to do with it. So to blame our government for that is pointless. Our government gave him a slap on the wrist. They removed him from the job, that's all. Our government actually did not pursue charges against him. It was the laborers, the labor unions.
Right. But the fact that these student protesters appear to have shown a lot of faith in him and that he's going to play a very important role in the interim government, do you think that's a mere coincidence?
No, I think this is the pro-Yunus group, and that's fine. If that's what they want, let them have it. Let him show what he can do.
Okay. Another very, very prominent Bangladeshi freethinker. This is what Taslima Nasreen has said. Of course, she has been very much against fundamentalism in Bangladesh, but she has, and I'm quoting exactly what she says. She says that she knelt down to Hifazat-e-Islam Bangladesh fanatics, donated vast amounts of land, huge sums of wealth to enable the building of more madrasas, and after kneeling down to Islamic fundamentalists creating a demon, she is now being devoured by her own demon. These are, of course, this quote is in reference to Sheikh Hasina. How would you respond to Taslima Nasreen? Is there any element of truth in what she's saying?
None whatsoever. You talk about democracy, you say democracy involves, on one hand, you're saying my mother became autocratic. On the other hand, she was accommodating a little bit, just giving them some breadcrumbs just to pacify them. You cannot ignore them completely either. So, we are a very secular party. We believe in secularism. It's not that we knelt down. I mean, to use that kind of language, personally, I think it's shameful. Because, believe you me, we are very secular. My family is very secular. So the image that my mother or any of us would kneel down, no. Those madrasas were built with Saudi money. The Saudi government wanted to build mosques and madrasas. And our view was, if we can also build community centers there, we can then at least control some of, make something social there rather than just being religious indoctrination. So you can't, this is the problem is everyone is a critic, everyone has an opinion, but, well, now all these critics have their time. Let's see how they perform.
Right. Right. And how are you viewing the release of Khalida Zia from house arrest that was announced mere hours after her mother's resignation that was declared by the army chief? Is this also something that, is something that is on expected lines, according to you?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. Look, she's an elderly woman. She has served her time for her corruption. And yeah, that's fine. At some point, she has to be released. So.
And do you see the BNP now in a favorable position to shape the proceedings and whether Khalida Zia will lead the way from here on?
That I don't know. That is up to them. But I don't think it's going to be Khalida. I think Khalida Zia's health is not well and she's in advanced years. So it will most likely be her son, who unfortunately has been convicted of corruption, of assassinations and terrorism. So if that is who these people end up bringing back into the country, well, Bangladesh's future, and of course, BNP is allied with Jamaat-e-Islam, which is a terrorist organization. So if you have elections without the Awami League, they're the only ones who can win.
Right.
Also, the only one who can beat them in an election is the Awami League, but this government is basically cracking down on the Awami League. So that's what the future holds for Bangladesh.
Right. Also, I must mention two things. There's a lot of talk about whether all of these protests, whether there's a role of Pakistan, ISI. There was a visit to Beijing that we know had to be cut short abruptly, where Sheikh Hasina had visited. There's also the talk of the deep state, the United States, etc., being possibly involved. How do you look at this? And do you think that protests on the scale that they have been taking place in Bangladesh is possible or would have been possible without any foreign hand within it?
No, I don't think so at all. I think there was definitely a lot of coordination. The student protesters were only in the forefront, but behind them, those who were attacking the police, killing the police, they were attacking police stations with firearms. They were heavily armed. They were well coordinated. And that is not possible without external support.
Right. And what would you say to back up those claims in terms of what you've seen? Is it the incidents that took place in China with Beijing reportedly not in your favor? The United States was reportedly upset over different aspects of Sheikh Hasina's policies. Do you think there's been a pattern there that's been reflected?
I don't think China has anything to do with it. China has never interfered in our internal affairs, and they had nothing to do with it this time either. Our policy has always been friendship to all. So India is our neighbor and our dearest friend, but we have good relations with China too. But, you know, Pakistan has been involved in Bangladesh for a long time. Our government had stopped all ISI activity in Bangladesh, all support for the insurgents in India. But I'm sure ISI did not stop trying. And yes, the U.S. Called our elections, the State Department announced that our elections weren't free and fair. Why? Because we arrested the militants who had conducted arson attacks in the previous election to ensure a peaceful election. So who knows? Who knows who was involved? I do not have any evidence, but yeah, I think you have hit the nail on the head.
Right, right. And also, you know, how do you foresee a stable transition to an interim government now in Bangladesh? What is your prediction of what the roadmap ahead is?
Well, that is not for me to say. That is up to Dr. Yunus. We shall see what he's able to do. He's being put in charge. Now the people will see his performance.
Right. And, you know, in the context of Sheikh Hasina here in the national capital, what are your hopes from the Indian government? Of course, she has been a friend to India as far as successive regimes are concerned. Are you hoping that New Delhi would favorably consider a political asylum? What's the thoughts that are going through your mind at the moment?
Oh, I'm sure New Delhi would. There's absolutely no reason why the Indian government, Mr. Modi's government, Prime Minister Modi's government wouldn't. But I think for India, especially with the Islamists as well having free reign in Bangladesh now, that should be the bigger concern. You see, a political party has its following. And even though you've seen this mob, Dr. Yunus, these intellectuals, they do not have a political party. They do not have followers in the villages. They do not have followers everywhere who will follow their ideology and follow their and support them. So this is what you're seeing now in the administration, is that the administration has basically given up. I heard today that administration offices were burned down by the mob. Well, the civil servants are joking, well, when these guys take over, how are they going to run the country? The offices are burnt down. There are not even any chairs to sit on. So, you know, the police aren't listening to them because these guys aren't a political party. We'll see. It remains to be seen. But I seriously doubt. I think this is going to be chaos in Bangladesh. Chaos will continue.
Yes, but, you know, my last question to you is this, and a lot of concern, of course, you've referred to this, is the kind of attacks that have been taking place, as you're saying, of course, in government offices and police stations, but also on temples, also on homes. When I put this question across to Mr. Yunus yesterday, he says that perhaps we are exaggerating or taking a one-sided view and that these need to be investigated, quote unquote. Now, this is something that is very serious, because at the end of the day, if human beings are attacked, it doesn't matter which religion or which part of the country they are from. One certainly expects those in responsible positions to be more responsible in their commentary and be quick to condemn the violence. Do you really see this kind of situation, which could very easily spiral out of control, you know, coming under control in the next regime? How are you looking at things from that perspective of what's going to take place as far as the civil society and this kind of mindless violence that appears to be taking place?
I think you've answered the question yourself. If the person in charge of this interim government says we have to investigate while people are being killed, then I have nothing more to say. You see, the problem with our civil society, they have a loud voice. They get more coverage in media, they get more coverage in print, they get more coverage online, their voice gets heard more. But it doesn't mean that they have leadership capability. that they are able to govern. It's one thing to have an opinion. It's another thing to be able to run a country. Everybody has an opinion. But once you are put in charge, then how do you govern? Well, I think you're seeing that already. You have answered the question already.
All right. Sajeeb Wazed Joy, I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time out and speaking to us here at Times Now.